Well, that sucked. Oregon season is over. What's going on? Schulte and Will sitting in with you for this very somber edition of the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard show. And for the first time all season, unfortunately, it is a losing edition of the Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard show. Ryan Buckley was down at the game, so you got me and Will Ortner breaking it down. We'll dive into all the reasons, or really just seemed like a couple of reasons why Oregon was not able to get it done in the Rose Bowl and the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. 41-21 the final. Number 8 Ohio State demolishing number 1 Oregon in a game that felt just about over right after it got started. Just sitting down to start, getting everything ready for the game, pulling highlights. It almost had really like no chance or no feel for any Duck fans like positive as soon as the kick started, or as soon as the kickoff happened, because it was just dominant, like I said, from Ohio State's end, basically pure and simple from start to finish. Yeah, you wanted that nice expected classic Rose Bowl clash. Well, unfortunately, what you got instead was a pretty big statement. I'm not sure anybody can beat Ohio State at this point. They looked really good with their 31-0 lead midway through the second quarter against an undefeated Oregon team coming in. Come on, they'd already beaten 3 playoff contenders this year. Of course, they beat Ohio State in October already. Yeah, so this just obviously not a win for Ohio State, but it is also a warning shot, I think, for the rest of college football. But we are here trying to break down why this happened. Will, that was an ugly game that nobody expected it to go the way that it did. Tell me what your initial takeaways are in this beatdown Oregon suffered 41-21 in the Rose Bowl.
I thought that Ohio State had an incredible game plan early on. I think that they have a wide receiver that is truly, truly special. And we've talked about different receivers that have come through Ohio State. I mean, shoot, Emeka Ibuka, he's a special wide receiver. He's going to be an early draft pick. He might be an early day 2 guy. There's a chance he's a late day 1 guy.
Yeah.
You go through Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr. You go down the list. Ohio State has had those types of wide receivers. And it feels like with Jeremiah Smith, like you might have the next iteration and he might be the best iteration. What he was able to do right from the start, I mean, to just catch a little swing pass out, make Oregon's 2 defenders miss, outrun the safety, and he's doing it at the size that he is. It was very, very impressive. And it's clear that Ohio State on their defense, they made a game switch. They switched the type of defense that they run. They went with a 3 safety look. They went to a 4-2-5 so they could put Downs in the middle of the field, and they put him in a spot where he's a little bit deeper than the linebackers, but he's a little bit in from where the safeties were at, and they just let Caleb Downs go out and make plays. If he wanted to add himself into a run fit, he could, and he was a big reason why they were making big stops early on Jordan James and Noah Whittington. And then when you needed him in pass coverage, he sat right there. Tez Johnson, he's known for going across the middle of the field and making that short and intermediate catch. It wasn't there because Caleb Downs was there. So I just thought that Ohio State won. They came in and they had a great game script, and the plays that they wanted to run early on offensively, they all worked. When you look at their defense, they made a switch, and it completely confused Oregon until probably that last drive in the second quarter, and by that point, it was too late.
Yeah, they couldn't get moving at all until either on offense or it seemed on defense, really until the end of the first half. They were able to score. But yeah, Oregon simply had no answers. It was just bad. And by the way, if you want to chime in on the Vancouver Ford text line, 503-864-6FAN, you can do so, or on the YouTube chat. We are on YouTube here for this Pacific Office Automation Postgame Scoreboard show. Love to read your comments and your takeaways from this game. But yeah, Oregon simply had no answers. They really, in the first half, just came out looking awful. 139 yards total on offense, 75 of which was in that, basically, I would call it a desperation drive right before halftime. And defensively, it was just open season for Ohio State. Oregon couldn't handle anything that they were throwing at him. They couldn't pressure Will Howard. He had the best half, I think, of his college football career. He threw for like 270 yards and 3 tutties before halftime even started, and the Buckeyes racked up 390 yards total by halftime. I believe that was including that 66-yard run from Travion Henderson as well. Oregon could not stop anything, the run or the pass. Ohio State was able to establish it very quickly, and of course those struggles compounded by key injuries to one Jordan James. We saw Evan Stewart not able to play at all because apparently Dan Lanning had told a couple of reporters, I think it was Ian Fitzsimmons via ESPN, is what Dusty Harris said during the game, that Lanning told him, well, he got banged up in pregame warmup. So you were so excited about the lack of injuries that Oregon was dealing with. They were coming in healthy, but one kind of, I would say, con about coming in so healthy and having so much time to prepare is that big gap of time to prepare. And, the Ducks were able to kind of show a little bit of something, had 2 scores in a row at the end of the first half, going into the second half to start the third quarter for them. You thought maybe they had a chance, but Will, I think, and we can break down like what Oregon didn't do, what Ohio State did do, but I do think, and before I break down what Oregon didn't do, I got to give props to Ohio State. They are one of the best teams in college football. It's obvious. They've obviously made changes from the beginning of the season to now. You mentioned that now we are seeing what people thought Ohio State could be at the beginning of the year. This is it. This is the team that everybody thought would show up, and frankly, I don't think Vegas even expected Oregon not to show up today.
No one predicted this game to be a blowout. No one that was serious, at least, right? What Ohio State, maybe they should thank Michigan for what they did to them, because as soon as Michigan beat up on Ohio State, it's like all of a sudden everything started to click. The offense started to look a lot more prolific. They weren't trying to force the run game in between the tackles. They started running a little bit off tackle, and that's made a big difference for them. And honestly, no, there's no team that can stop Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka. Like, there's just no one out there that's going to have the amount of cover corners needed to slow those two players down. Frankly, I would have thought that Oregon had the secondary to at least get a couple big stops.
Ditto.
They did it in the first game. The difference is that in this one, I felt like Smith took over. I felt like in the first quarter, maybe first half, you could say, he just decided that he was going to be the best player on the field. There were a couple times, 100%. That first touchdown that he had, he gets lost in man coverage. You've got a safety trying to make a play on the back end, a touchdown saving tackle. He makes him miss. He walks in. The second touchdown that he has, it's blown coverage. He runs a crisp route. He gets himself open in the corner. There's no one around him. Easy passes. But I remember the second pass that he caught where he had to go up and over. I believe it was Reed. It might have been Muhammad. But Will Howard throws the ball a little too high, and Smith just says, that's fine. I'll go up and I'll go make that play. There are so few wide receivers that can go and make that play consistently to the level that he does. Then you've got to deal with Ibuka in the slot. I mean, Ibuka's touchdown is unbelievable. The ball literally hits the DB's hand. His left arm is pinned to his body. He reaches out with his right hand, catches the ball, pulls it in, doesn't use two hands. It's all one-handed as he walks into the end zone. The level of concentration that you have to pull that ball in and to be able to push your way into the end zone with strength there, it's second to none. So when you have two wide receivers like that and Will Howard is playing at this level, hey, hats off to you. This is the Ohio State team that everyone said they could be. This is why they were saying, hey, look, the potential's on the paper. The problem was they hadn't showed it all year. And then when they finally show it, they show it against a Tennessee team at home after a layoff. So it's like, are they going to be able to replicate that? Well, clearly they were able to replicate it. And I think you're seeing why a lot of people were saying, Josh Pay, the Cover 3 podcast type of guys, people here at Odyssey, BetQL, they were saying, wait until they get it right. Because if they figure it out, they are the best team in college football, and it isn't close.
Their scoring drives were, at least in the first half, all super short and full of a bunch of chunk plays. I think the first play of the game was a massive gain to G. Scott Jr. for Ohio State, kind of a fake screen, essentially, where he just then went around the back of the other receiver that was faking the screen and took it upfield for a 20-some yard gain. Those big chunk plays basically exposed Oregon's lack of defense or lack of communication on defense, because you then had Kobe Savage, I think, biting on another fake where he essentially, as the safety, got taken away from the center of the field because the receiver on one side faked over to the sideline. Well, that essentially opened it up for, I think it was Egbuka, for that big touchdown pass wide open in the first quarter as well. It was just obvious from the get-go that Oregon, I heard Mike Jorgensen and Jerry Allen saying it a lot, I heard that they were just on their heels. Oregon was playing on their heels basically the entire game from the get-go. And frankly, that's not something we've really seen Oregon do. So it's really tough when you've never been in that situation before. A little bit at times, obviously, against Ohio State. Maybe I would say a tiny bit of a dogfight against Wisconsin just because the weather was so weird and you were only scoring at one end of the field during that contest. And then, a couple of early season hiccups. But we have not seen the Oregon Ducks playing from behind like they did tonight, and they just couldn't. And hats off to Ohio State again. We'll get into more reasons why Oregon did lose, but once again, props to the Ohio State Buckeyes. You talk about the great performances by Jeremiah Smith. 7 for 187 and 2 tutties, and then Edbuka getting 72 yards and a touchdown as well, including that long. It was a 42-yard touchdown, his longest pass. These chunk plays, including that 66-yard run by Travion Henderson, it just exposed Oregon, both playing on their heels and just not really looking like they were ready at the start of the game.
You got out-coached, man. What Chip Kelly had planned on the offensive side and what Knowles had planned on the defensive side. Ohio State, they're playing right now like they're upset. They're playing right now like when Michigan kicked him in the junk and took him out back and pantsed them. Everyone's making fun of Ohio State. Everyone's talking about, hey, Ohio State, you might get booed. Well, this season is a waste now. You bought all these players, and what'd you do with them? And so they had to sit there and they had to stew on that for 2 weeks. And now Ohio State looks like they've finally reached their potential. Unfortunately for them, it took a second loss in a game that they should not have lost at home to an inferior opponent in their rival, the worst team possible for them to lose to. And it feels like that's woken up this Ohio State team. And if you want to come in here, and I'm not saying you necessarily, Jordan, but I know that people on the text line have sent it in and people in the YouTube chat, and we're going to hear about it. I guarantee we're going to hear about it because that's what a narrative is going to be forming the next couple days when it comes to national radio, local radio, any kind of sports talk. It's, well, they had too many days off. That's not why you lost this game. You got outright spanked. The better team took you out back, and they let you know they were the top dog. That's what happened. It has nothing to do with 25 days off. You got smacked. A coaching staff in Ohio State had a better plan than you did in this game. So you got out-coached, and then the players out-executed your players. You literally ran for negative yards. That's not all on coaching. That's on your offensive line. That's on your tight ends. That's on your wide receivers. That's on your running backs.
Yeah.
You got smacked. It happens.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel minus 43 yards because of the 7 sacks that he took, and that unfortunately took Oregon's rushing into the negative. And I'm 35. I've been watching Ducks football, basketball, all kinds of sports since I was like a kid, but like 10 years old, 9 years old, 25, 26 years ago, I cannot ever remember in my time watching Oregon football them having a negative rushing performance like that. So super frustrating. I just cannot believe that we are here watching what we watched, but it did happen. Oregon lost to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl 41-21.